on.
Is this thing on? All right, here we go. Welcome to the AfterWord.
From the loft.
From the loft. Eric's not here. It is time to party. We can do whatever we want. Glad you're here listening in. We are Vince, Betty, Kirsten, Austin.
Collectively, we are all...
Yeah. What's our band name?
The Lofters.
The Lofters.
But that ties into our question for the day.
Oh, that is a great... Oh, yeah. Let me tell you what we're doing. If you haven't listened in before, the point of all of this, the AfterWord, is to talk about, which I don't know, have we ever explained the name AfterWord?
I think you probably have.
Yeah, maybe long ago. Let's
one
do it
of our
again.
previous seasons, because we're on season
11.
11.
Oh, season 11. The AfterWord, not the Afterward with an A. No one says it that way, but I was trying to make the distinction. So it's after Sunday, we get to talk about the word that was preached. And our hope is that we are able to draw out some application things, just to have some discussion about things that may have hit us during the teaching or from our reading of the text, and hopefully help you, the listener, with some of the things that you're thinking through and having conversations about as well. So thanks for joining.
I have a question.
Already.
Well, who decided on the name, or was it a joint effort?
I think it was Eric. Wait, do you like it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, then it was Eric. Yeah. I think it was Eric's idea. After we put it out there, though, we realized that there was another thing called that. But they don't capitalize the W in word. We do, because we value God's word. Not really.
So we just say it loud,
Yeah,
AfterWord.
Yeah. Maybe we should do the tagline, the AfterWord from the loft. That's the full name.
The full name.
Okay. Eric's going to be mad. Let's move on. Here's our opening question to get to know us a little more. This question was brought to us from Austin.
That's right.
Because he's been thinking about this.
Uh-huh.
You got a list of people in your mind already. Here's the question.
Should have been.
If you were to plan your wedding, so if you're married, you kind of have to step back a little bit. If you aren't married, think about it.
Vow renewal.
Or
Vow renewal.
Vow
Yeah,
renewal. All right. So if you're in a matrimonious perspective, who would you have? What celebrity musician would you have come and perform for you and your spouse or spouse to be?
At what portion
Here
are
we
we
go.
talking?
Okay, no, I was actually about to ask
we
the same
talking about,
question. That would change my answer.
Yeah, are we talking about a dance afterwards, or as you walk down the aisle?
That's
No, this is great. You get to choose what.
Choose your own adventure.
Choose what portion. Yeah, this came up because we were at an engagement party, and I kept pushing for my friends to get Adele to come be at their wedding. But then another friend, Max, he said, okay, this is perfect. We'll get, Adele can do the ceremony, and then we'll get Akon for later, and then the two of them will join together, and they'll do something later.
Oh.
So is that your answer?
I don't think so.
For his friend, it was.
Yeah.
So we're answering for our friends.
No, you're answering for you, but you can choose anything for your friends.
I would choose the Colorado Symphony.
Oh, wow.
Whoa.
And then
Okay.
some other person to join them. We've seen
Watch House
with the Colorado Symphony, and that was phenomenal. And then I've listened often to Gregory Alan Isaacoff with the Colorado Symphony. And so I think I would probably pick the Colorado Symphony to be there, and then have some sort of maybe Gregory or Watch House, something, probably something folky to go with the symphony.
I would approve, and I would hopefully be there. So
yeah, would we agree on that? Is that who you'd pick too?
I like that choice.
Okay,
I'm
good.
trying to think of somebody who I would like to.
Wait, I should have thought about this more. Wait, Betty, help me out. Who does the Tarzan music? Do you know?
Phil Collins.
Oh, Phil Collins. There we go. I'll go with Phil Collins. He's going to be at my wedding.
He's
got nice
he's
music,
kind of
right?
up there in years. Would it be Phil Collins in his heyday, or
Because all you want is that drum solo from
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right as I walk in, maybe
Yes,
it'll be
you want
perfect.
that. The lights go out and Lawson comes in with that drum solo.
That's my choice. That's what I'm going with. I'll take any age, old, young.
All right. Maybe you should watch some videos of how he is now, because
I saw a video of him. He is not doing
Not
well.
doing real
He's
well.
not-
I don't
So-
want to ruin it. I'm
Okay.
going to stay in ignorance.
Betty, I'm still trying to think. I'm pushing this out to think through it.
Yeah, I have no idea. I feel like the artists that I really like are not people that I probably want at my reception, but I would probably want Chris Renzema either during the ceremony
nice.
and or like first dance kind of thing. The rest of it, I have no idea.
One Direction.
No, that's not
Okay, One Direction would
Yeah.
bad. Sure. Do you like Ed Sheeran? You get Ed Sheeran at your
well,
wedding?
I would choose One Direction if that were possible.
Okay.
But that-
Not so much anymore. Yeah.
They'll reunite at the wedding.
Yeah. I don't know. I still don't. You guys didn't talk long enough for me to get there.
Would you choose One Direction?
I don't know if I could name a song. What's a One Direction song?
There's a,
Okay, anyway. I don't know who I would choose, because you want something that not just you is going to enjoy. You want to look out and see your friends really,
like
really
your
enjoying
wife,
this.
like maybe she
Well-
chose the symphony
No.
and Gregory
I'm
Alan
saying
Isaacoff.
that's a great choice. People would like that, but you want to look out and see people like really enjoying. I'd probably choose Willie Nelson.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. I was going to say, you're thinking too much about the crowd. You got to think
Willie
about
Nelson.
you.
Would he join the symphony?
No, just
No.
Willie. Just Willie. Just Willie. All right,
I
let's
feel
move
like
on.
Eric's going to be so disappointed in us.
He already is.
No.
Yeah. All right. Here, I'm going to try to give a recap. I am finding giving recaps to this challenging. So I'll try to work through the passage quickly, without just reading the passage, and we'll try to get into some questions that are going to be helpful for us. So Paul, let me give some background. Paul's writing a letter to the church in Corinth, a group of people he loves, he knows, he's been with them for a while. He's probably now in Ephesus writing back to them because he's heard some things about them that are not going well. So there's division in the church. We saw it start last week. He continues on this week. And so he starts the first 5 verses with just talking about how his hope in coming to them to begin with, so he's looking back at when he first came to them, was not to come with some big lofty argument about who Jesus was, but just to come with some simple language about the truth of the gospel. That was his hope. That was his drive. And that, from my perspective, he's saying that because that's the thing that creates unity among a people, the simplicity and beauty of the gospel. So he's sort of opposing that to what the Corinthians are experiencing in that day with the their high value of rhetoric and debate and these professional people who have stepped into these roles. So he's pushing against that, saying that's not what we need. The gospel is really simple. And then the second part of the passage, he talks against some of the rulers, the people in power in this day who could have had an influence on the people. They aren't coming with wisdom. In fact, if they would have had the wisdom of God, they wouldn't have crucified Jesus. And really what he's getting at there is they had not yet received from the Spirit the revelation of the truth of the gospel, and went through with crucifying Jesus. We know from the outside, Paul knew this as well. That was all a part of God's plan. But he's pushing into this that the Spirit of God is the one who affects and imparts this secret, what he calls a secret and hidden wisdom of God, which is just the truth of the gospel to people. And so, this is my paraphrase, it doesn't matter how polished we are in our speech. If the Spirit of God is not active, it doesn't matter what we're saying. And then he ends the chapter with, it's confusing, and hopefully we'll get to some of this. He ends it with the natural person and the spiritual person, the natural person being the one who's not a Christian. I'll just use that language. The spiritual person is the one who is. And ends it on this sort of up note of we have the mind of Christ. We have the ability to understand the things of Jesus because of what the Spirit has done. That ought to bring unity. So there's that. Does that make sense? Any questions before we jump in? Any thoughts about that? No? Okay. Any other second choices about musicians? You kind of back up on that? Still going with Phil Collins?
I'm sticking with it.
All right. All right. I think it's interesting that he has such a wealth of music, and you said, who's the guy who did Tarzan?
Yeah. That's his most well-known things, right?
Yes. Here's a question that I pushed on some yesterday, and I think it's part of what Paul is getting at, that we could apply this. What and I'll just ask it as we have it written here, as I have it written, and we'll talk about it. What keeps us from sharing our faith when there are moments when we shy away from it? What are the things for you as individuals that keep you from sharing your faith as boldly or courageously as you know you could?
I think sometimes just the awkwardness of the moment, or the awkwardness of sharing about Jesus, especially if it's of somebody that doesn't seem real open to it, or you know that there's going to be this weirdness now between you and relationship. And so, I don't know. I think often it's just awkwardness.
Can I push some? I'll do this for everybody, not just you, Kirsten. So I'm not just picking on you. What's at the heart of that, the root of that for you?
Me. I'm most concerned about me. I'm most concerned about how it's going to make me look. I'm not as concerned about the person and their salvation as I am about the uncomfortable nature of the relationship.
And I think we would all fit into that. So that's why I asked that. Like that's I don't know how this is going to impact their view of me. So I've been there. Any other thoughts come to mind? What keeps us from sharing our faith?
I think to add to that too, there's also sometimes a fear that it's going to actually shut down the relationship. Yeah. And so, there's that tension of, is this an open door? And if I step through this door, then is that door going to close? Like we have some neighbors that I've tried really hard to build relationships with. And I try to just kind of, put little things out there every now and again. Yeah. And almost every time it's just shut down completely. And so, it's that tension of, is it shut down because it's not the Spirit's time? Is it shut down because they're just not open to it and I need to be bold? Is it shut down because this is just not what the Lord has? I don't know. Right. And so I think there's always this insecurity of, yes, it would make the relationship awkward, but there's also like a real tension of like, I don't know if the Spirit has opened the door here, and if this is something that I need to be bold and push through the discomfort, or is it that I'm pushing an agenda that if the Spirit's not here, it's going to fall on deaf ears. And, so I think there's not always this like clear, this is the moment to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's a real thing. I think I felt that myself, where it feels like such a big push to share the gospel. And maybe it's today's day and age, and is the gospel offensive or not? But what's more scary than not sharing the gospel is being the person who shared the gospel and closed them off to it for the foreseeable future. I don't want to be the Christian in their past that was so offensive that they became closed.
I knew this one guy once, and this is what he said. Yeah.
But at that point, then you're leaving it up to, it's like, so I'll leave it up to someone and hope they eventually do it right. So we convince ourselves not to do it. I was really, it was a weird, challenging, encouraging, challenging point during the sermon where you brought this up, and I know absolutely at work, I have told myself, well, if they push back with this question, I don't know the answer, so I better just not do it until later when I know the answer. So absolutely, lack of knowledge or thinking it's all on my shoulders to lead them to if I have just the right answers, they'll come to faith, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. That was something that came to mind. Just fear in a lot of different forms, like fear I won't have the right answers or won't be able to articulate myself clearly. So therefore I'll look stupid. That's, I think, what a lot of the fear is like how I'm going to look or how I think I'm going to look in front of someone. And I think in, I think of it pretty extremely sometimes too. Like, not even so much fear of it being awkward after that, but automatically I'm like, they're going to hate me if I bring something that like they don't want to hear. Like, they're going to hate me, or yeah, that it would get awkward too. Or I'm just trying to like force something that I don't need to talk through right now. And I don't know, all rooted in myself and how I'm scared others are going to view me.
I think also for me, it's not just a knowledge argument that I can make against myself, but you know, for the sake of being vulnerable, or in case people need to hear this, I think even so this job I've been at for a while, right? There have been times where I've gotten burnt out or worn down, or even, you know, depressed and lowly and all those things. But so I think even in my head, I've argued, well, the gospel is good news and Christians are meant to be joyful and all of those. So if I am sad or down or life feels hard, how can I present that to someone and say, hey, come along and follow Christ?
Because look how good my life is.
By the way, everything is terrible, but you join in that. And I think that can be a real discouragement for sharing your faith.
And my answers would be all the same. So I'm really not picking on any of us. I'm picking on all of us. What's the root of all of those things? Right? Isn't it? It seems to be self, right? How we're going to look, how we're going to feel, or what you were just saying, Austin, how you may miscommunicate even in your actions. So, but that goes back on you,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think sometimes too, I just don't actually treasure the gospel enough to proclaim it. And so I can see spaces where I take it for granted, or it's just what I've always known or always experienced. And so there's a lack of zeal or even a dullness to it because it's just so familiar. And so I don't treasure it as something that is the most important thing in life.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest changes I feel like in my perspective with sharing faith happened maybe a year ago or so, where for the longest time I thought all of my colleagues are doing well, things are fine, and then here I am trying to push something on them to change their lives in a way. And then something clicked, or a sermon or somewhere along the way, where you realize, people are hurting and they need this and they're looking for meaning. And I couldn't believe I'd never thought of that. I thought, I'm just trying to force something, not bringing something that they really need or can bring them peace.
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of that's our culture right now, isn't it? That we put forward this like best foot forward, and even just the social media culture of let me take pictures of all the wonderful things in my life, that I think it kind of numbs us to the reality that people are hurting and suffering and longing for purpose and longing for the things that actually the gospel can fulfill. But we forget that that's actually the case because we see such a whitewashed picture of life for most people.
Yeah.
So why do we think Paul says in the very first verse, he says, when I came to you, so he's talking about the first time he came to them and stayed with them. I didn't come to proclaim the testimony of God with lofty speech or wisdom. Why did he come, or what did he come with then? What's he getting at?
I mean, I'm sure there's a piece of him that knew I'm a church planter and I'm a missionary and I'm an evangelist. And so I'm going to be moving from place to place to place. So if I come and I have this amazing oratory skill where people get attracted to the gospel because of the way that I say it, and then I'm going to be leaving, am I setting them up for following me, or am I setting them up for following Christ? And so I think what he's saying is, I didn't come with any sort of impressiveness to you all. I came with the gospel because it's what you can grab onto even when I'm not with you.
Yeah, which kind of links it back to last week, right? Where he talks about the divisions that are happening, where people are connecting to individuals and what those individuals mean for them or have significance there. And so for him to say, that's not why I came. I didn't come that you would somehow connect to me, which is, we talked about this before we started recording, verse 5, where he actually says that, so that your faith might not rest in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. I think he understood the danger of people having an experience of being under his teaching and being in some ways impressed by the powerful work of God, but not being able in their maturity to understand that powerful work of God wasn't just because it was Paul and the fancy things he could say. Have you all ever had that experience? I'm throwing a different question in that we didn't talk through. Have you had that experience where there was something that was powerful moving in your past where you began to hang your faith on that powerful moment or that experience? We'll give a little time because we didn't talk about this before, but it just came to mind.
Are you asking powerful moment personally, sort of internally, versus, you listening to someone, in which I guess it could be both.
Any. Just some moment that it was truly God at work. I mean, that's what Paul's talking about. I think there's a movement of God, but I think we can often, I'm thinking of I'll just put it this way, like the Camp High experience, where you can kind of go back to that moment in your head and your heart. And man, things have never been the same as like when they were that year. And we begin to rest on that.
Yeah, first one that comes to mind for me, I think of somewhere early on in high school, I started listening to sermons and hearing the word taught. And I remember this aha moment of, oh, the Bible has meaning in my life. And, this is useful for today. And having such a feeling of God's love and power through that year that really was a euphoric moment that I don't think I've ever experienced since then, but has been something I can hang my hat on as far as, no, God is real. There was something to that. But also, you're right, can be very easy to think, oh, I must be doing something wrong. I'm not walking in what I felt back then.
It's experiential.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think mine's maybe the opposite in that I grew up in the church, and I believe that this church was faithful. I don't really remember anything about my time there. But I don't know when I actually understood the gospel. And I think for years and years, I had this like cynical bent in me towards this church and thinking, man, I never heard the gospel. And then realizing, oh, wait, I think it's that I probably did hear the gospel, but the Spirit had not yet opened my eyes to actually understanding what was being taught. And so I think I was cynical about this church that I grew up in, rather than recognizing it was probably that the Spirit hadn't worked in me yet, because I believe that this church was faithful. And I'm sure that the gospel was proclaimed. And so it was more about the timing of when the Spirit actually opened my eyes versus any issues with the church.
You saying Camp High kind of helped me think of one, but my summer after, so it's like a whole season more than a moment, but my summer after sophomore year of college, I went to like a NAVS training program all summer. And that was a time that I can point back to, like, wow, I was so on fire for the Lord. Every week we were going out and sharing our faith, and we were in these studies and all of these things, and then came back to a setting that is not just a bubble where everyone is doing that, and that is like part of the experience. Like, well, my faith is terrible, and this is, it's never going to be like it was then. But fail to also see like there's something very unique in that cultivated experience. But I feel like that was it for me.
Isn't it interesting how something that is good, our enemy can use so quickly to turn, and we then it then becomes the thing, which is, I think, is what Paul's getting at. Like, it would be good for him to come to Corinth to communicate the truth of the gospel, to see people come to know Jesus and begin to walk faithfully with him. That's a good thing. But then for them to say, and if not for Paul, I would have never been here, is where the enemy tweaks that just enough where it becomes then about Paul. So I think verse 5 is a turning point where he says, so that your faith might not, I didn't come in these kinds of thing with lofty speech so that your faith wouldn't rest in the wisdom of men and my wisdom, but in the power of God. The enemy grabs onto that stuff pretty quickly.
Well, I think that's beautiful. And I think I worked for an organization in the past that had, there was a lot of, it was a church organization, and they celebrated the big powerful, quote unquote, successful churches. So it was always the people who had the stage were the ones who had the big churches and the ones who had, more than 1,000 people at their church. And yet the majority of this organization was made up of, churches that were probably 120 or less, the small faithful churches. And there was this huge push and this huge, I'd just say push that you were successful if you had these huge churches, and that the Spirit was moving in ways if you had these huge churches. And the thing that was so telling was there was one particularly large church that had seen a ton of success, at least worldly success, had grown really fast. And then the pastor there ended up leaving, going to a different church. And he can't get this church up off the ground to save his life. And it's interesting to consider that, this guy was platformed and celebrated, and kind of look at him, look how successful he is. And now he's in a new environment and the Spirit's not at work. And so, I don't know, it's so easy to be drawn into this deception of what successful is, big and sexy and numbers and all of that kind of stuff, rather than recognizing like it really is a work of the Spirit. It's not the man who's doing the work.
Yeah, I thought there was a really telling point during your sermon as well, when you mentioned that Paul would have also been trained and could come in with logic and arguments, but chose not to. I kept dwelling on this section just because of that. He was thinking about what was good for their faith. He wasn't considering his ego or himself. I just jotted a note down that was, when was the last time I put this much thought into someone else's well-being? And even just he's thinking about their faith and the future and what's going to be best. And that was convicting. I feel like I'll do the helpful, like the minimum requirement to be helpful or kind of care for someone. But yeah, he's going to some pretty great lengths to do that.
Yeah. Thanks for confessing that, sharing that. I thought about Paul and his abilities. I mean, we know he was trained, but you match what he says here with the way he interacts with the people in Athens in Acts chapter 17, where he's able to pull out, here's what some of your poets say, and here's what some of your idols communicate, and he just walks through that whole thing. It's a really well-crafted argument for the defense of the faith. But here he says, I mean, I'll try to figure out a question to ask here, but verse 2, I decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. I don't know what the question is there, but that to me is a motivating thing to think about. This is Paul. He could have talked circles around any of us, the people of this day. And he just he brings himself to this place of saying, but that's not, I don't care. I'm just going to point all the attention to Jesus. Maybe a question that comes to mind, we wrote this one down earlier as we were talking, is what is it that motivates, this may get personal, what is it, truly, look at your heart, what is it that motivates you to communicate about your faith, to talk to someone else about your faith? What's the motivation? And it's been touched on by a few of you already.
I think sometimes for me it's duty. It's this sense of like, I'm a Christian, I should be doing this. Yeah. Which I think exposes again just the selfishness of my heart and how little I treasure the gospel. But there often is this sense of duty. And we've got some neighbors that have talked on and off about moving over in the next few years. And so there's also this sense of like, oh no, my door's closing and I haven't done this. So I need to get on this. Yeah.
So duty, what else comes to mind?
Yeah, I completely agree with duty. I also, it's something I ought to be doing, or so I can check a box off, right? I'm a Christian. I want to follow Christ. And so if I get to heaven and I've not shared my faith, I'll probably get slapped on the wrist or something. So I should, I was like, well, let's go do this a few times. And it's completely self-focused. You answered it a bit there, but this was challenging for me because when I think about sharing my faith, the majority of the reasoning for it is usually to check off a box so I can feel good. And yeah, I just left my work, so I feel similar to the door closing. And Paul's thinking about their future faith. And I guess in some way I thought, let's get the gospel in there before I'm gone. But it was not crossing my mind so that they can have a faith and be strong and go forward from there. Yeah.
I think there's also a cynicism in me as far as like theology goes. And what I mean by that is there's a piece of me that feels this sense of like, if they're chosen, whether I share with them or don't share with them, their end is going to be the same. So if God's chosen them, he's going to bring them to himself. If he hasn't, nothing I say matters. And so there's like this just hardened cynicism in me that feels kind of like, what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, that gets into some deep, we're starting to wade into some deep theological waters there. So if you have questions, Eric at thetownchurch.org.
He's got this.
He's sitting at home waiting for your questions. You can call in now. No, I think we've probably all felt that, Kirsten, and I think passages like this kind of highlight that. When we read, I'm sorry, I should probably know where these verses are. It's the Spirit's work to reveal to us the truths of the gospel. I'll just paraphrase it because I can't find it. That the Spirit is the one revealing. The Spirit of God is revealing those truths to us. And because of that, then we think, well, if that's what's happening, then what's my responsibility? I think we can all feel that way at times. Yeah. I don't want to. Do you have something there, Betty?
Yeah, I had one more with the motivations. Yeah. I mean, I agree with duty. I think especially when it was context where, everyone's going out to evangelize right now, so you better go too. But I think there's also been like a lot of pride in that too. Of like, I'm the one who's like willing to have these conversations with people, or I'm the one who's willing to go out on campus and meet students and share the gospel with them. And I think it's so rare for it to really truly be motivated by a love for the gospel. Yeah. But it's often like a love for myself too.
Well, and I think too, there's that fear of rejection, which is so funny that, we know that if somebody responds, they're responding because the Spirit has been at work. And yet when they reject the word that we've shared, it feels personal, And so it's easy to say, well, they believed because God was at work, but they rejected because God was not at work. And yet it always feels like a personal rejection.
And in that too, it's kind of going back to what Paul's saying. We're leaning on the right words that we could put together that they would then believe because we've crafted an argument that they can't get out of. They have to believe because I did such a good job of communicating this.
So, we're talking about the challenges and the pitfalls and all of that, but like, how do we turn that and say, like, how do we grow in this and how do we change and how do we start having right motivations? Because I think these are all things that we can relate with, but like, where is the right motivation there and how do we get to a point that that's our heart posture?
I don't know if I have an answer to that question. I think something that the where my mind goes is this. You and I, Kirsten, have spent 20 years with our boys communicating over and over and over the truth of the gospel. We know they're not going anywhere, or at least until they're 18, or we kick them out of our house. We know they're not going anywhere. We don't feel shame or embarrassment about communicating the truths of the gospel to them. We know that hopefully we've created a safe environment for them to have questions and to keep talking about it, and on and on. So we have that it's relationship is what it is. We have a built-in relationship. They haven't chosen, but they get it. They get that relationship. And so my mind goes there. Why is it with our boys we're able to communicate these things? We step out of that circle and it starts to get tricky. What is it? How do we have that kind of feel to other relationships that we're a part of? What's the missing factor?
I mean, the thing that's coming to mind is 1 Corinthians 13, that if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels but have not love, I'm a noisy gong. And so just considering that, like, when I think about our neighbors, I don't really love them if I'm not willing to talk to them about that. And so, I mean, to answer my own question, I think something that I've been praying over the last year or two is just, God, would you break my heart for these people in my life that don't know you? And would you just cause me to feel broken for them? And I see that happening in part through our neighbors' kids, because they are the funniest, most delightful children. And like, I think about their little girl, and she's always out there in all her sparkles, and, you know, just kind of draws you in and talks to you. They have no inhibitions. And I'm like, they're bound for hell. Like, they don't know Jesus. And when I think about that little girl in hell, I'm like, that breaks my heart. And I'm like, that's the Lord, like, softening my heart and answering that prayer. And so, but I just think it has to start with love. Yeah. Like, we have to love these people in our lives enough to tell them that they're on a road bound for hell, but there is a different way.
I completely agree, right? That they're bound for hell, but not only that, but God opened my eyes to the pains of this world too. Like I said earlier, that we often have this picture that they're doing well, that everything's fine in their life, but without knowing their Savior and the peace that brings, what are they putting their hope in that's failing them?
Yeah, I was thinking about that too, Austin, what you had said earlier about, I think we have this perception that everybody's doing okay. And what value would this really add to their life? And in doing that, we're not truly thinking about what they're experiencing. I mean, we all experience the hardship of this life, no matter where our fate is. We all experience the hard things of this life. For the Christian, whether we realize it or not all the time, we do have a hope that's beyond here. And there's reason to share that, because we're all hurting. We're all going through really broken and hard things. And what is it that we're using to soothe that pain? I think what you said, Kirsten, is a deep love. I think we pray that we would have a deep love. I want to bring it back to what Paul says, like just the simplicity of the gospel. And I don't think every interaction with our neighbors or whoever it is has to be, hey, did you know Jesus died for you and has a perfect plan for your life? But the ongoing relationship to talk about the hope that we have and where that hope comes from and why we have it, I think is where we go.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned it on stage about parents and their children, right? That it can actually help when you say, I don't know, let's look into this together. Kirsten, I want to go back to what you said about love, because I think God's been changing the way I view evangelism in the last year. And I think people can tell when you're doing something out of obligation versus an actual
That's good.
care. And so one of the biggest encouragements in the past year has been this, okay, I can be honest, right? I don't need to whack them over the head with a Bible, but I don't need to hide it either, right? So when someone asks you, why'd you do this, or what's the hope you have, or what'd you do this weekend, I can say, oh no, I went to church and I believe this. And if someone comes with a question that you don't know, that it's totally okay to say, well, I don't know the answer, but we can look into this. I feel like if a non-believer listened to someone say that, they would even be encouraged. Yeah. Like, oh, they are working through this, or I can ask them stuff, because they aren't going to come with, I know everything.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Anytime I've asked someone a question and they didn't know and came back with an answer later on or wanted to work through that with me, like that, I can tell they care and love me. And I think I neglect to see how that translates to other people too. Like, they probably feel the same thing when someone is willing to say, I don't know, but I want to take the time to figure this out with you. And yeah, that just speaks like a lot to me. And so how does it speak to others too?
So I think summarizing all of this is, I think it has to begin with prayer. Like, it has to start with praying for hearts that love the unbelievers in our life, and also hearts that are looking for opportunities. And so just asking the Lord to begin to soften your heart to see the unbelievers in your life, and then ask the Lord to open up opportunities. And then from that point on, it's like, well, all right, Spirit, it's go time, I guess. But if we're not praying about it, I don't know that those opportunities are going to become as evident as they could be.
Yeah, we may not see them. We may not be ready for them. I think even I have experienced this. I'm sure you all have as well. You begin to pray for someone regularly that God would be at work in their lives. You begin to see opportunities to encourage them or communicate with them about that. You also begin to see how God is at work in their lives. You can see it, you experience it, you're able to communicate that to them. I think that's a part of the way that God answers that prayer, is that he opens our eyes to see those things.
Yeah. And it requires like such patience on our end too, because I think it's easy to be praying and then you approach a conversation and they're like, oh, no. And then you want to give up immediately. But I had a friend in college who I had one conversation about church and he was pretty like, yeah, I'm not interested at all. And then just being willing to be patient and continue praying for him and investing in him, like a month later, he circled back to that conversation. And that opened a lot of doors for us to just continue to have these conversations and ask each other questions. And he came here like multiple times. So I think it was just being willing to wait and endure too, and not just give up on him because one interaction maybe didn't go well.
And I think that also speaks, Betty, to your relationship. You had a trusting relationship with him where he was able to come back around and ask questions, and that door was left open instead of slammed shut because of, to put it in Paul's words, some lofty speech or some word that was harsh. I want to say this because I think I know all of you well enough to know that while we can ask questions about what's your motivation, and our answers often go to, my motivation's often sin in this way, or those kinds of things. I think I know each of you well enough to know that you have at times, because of God's work in you, had right motivations, that you do love people, and that you have a heart to see people walk in freedom and walk with Christ. I've seen that in you as well, and know that about you. So that's an encouragement. So I don't want us to paint this picture of like black and white. There are a lot of places where God is at work in us and on us and through us. I feel the need to land on verse 16 where Paul says that we have the mind of Christ. That feels almost like this battle cry end to a conversation that Paul's having, like a rally of, we have the mind of Christ, and everybody cheers, yes, we do. How does that line hit you all, to hear Paul say, yeah, and we have the mind of Christ?
I think about how often I forget that. Like I know it's true, but I don't always live like it's true. And so I know God's word and I have the Spirit, and yet there's times that I forget that that's true.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I kind of feel similar. Like I really want to be encouraged by this, but it's easy for me to forget that's true, or to quickly go to, but not in the same way this person does, and then compare myself to others and forget that it is the same Spirit that's dwelling in me as it is in this person and that person too.
That's good.
Yeah, I even wrote this question down while listening to it, that you're right. He ends on such a high note. You have the mind of Christ. You're able to judge all these things without being judged. But yeah, internally I thought, okay, but what about all the times I've felt lost, or it's like, God, I have no idea what you're doing, or even when I'm distracted or in the humdrum and mundanity of normal life, right? I forget, wow, the omnipotent God, his Spirit and his mind are within me. Yeah, it's so easy to forget that.
Yeah, I have the same kind of thought. The mind of Christ is we have the mind of Christ. We have the ability to understand who Christ is and what he's about, not because we've come to some great conclusions, but because the Spirit of God who's been left as our helper, and Jesus said it's better that the Spirit would come. We have the Spirit in us to reveal to us the things of Jesus, which doesn't bring us to a place, we talked about this on Sunday, should not bring us to a place of boasting, but should bring us to a place of humble worship, that we, not because of what we've done, have the mind of Christ. It's beautiful. Can we ask the final question to please Eric? Because that's what we're about. People pleasing Eric.
It's a good question.
It is a good question. The question is, do you remember being born? That's not the question. That's not the question. What from this passage, sorry, Eric, that was a little jab. What from this passage draws your heart, mind, soul, your affections toward Jesus more and more?
This passage was a really huge encouragement to me. Just kind of coming out of last week, I was in a position of feeling just pretty inadequate and wrestling with how I've communicated things to a certain person, and I've just put a lot of pressure on myself that doesn't belong to me to carry. And I think this is a really sweet reminder of how, one, God is the one who does the work in other people's hearts, that he is revealing himself to them. It is not based on how I'm speaking and the ways that I'm maybe overcomplicating what is true, but he is at work in their hearts. And he is the one who loves these people more deeply than I ever could. And he delights in revealing himself to them.
That's good.
I think for me, I think it's crazy that God chooses to use people and use us. Like, even just as I shared today, like there's this cynicism in me, or there's this selfishness, or this looking at my own benefit, and all the sin that just comes wrapped in who I am. And yet God still chooses to use someone like me in the lives of others. Like, that's bananas. Like, I don't have my stuff figured out, and I make a mess of things, and yet God still chooses to use broken, sinful people.
That's good.
Yeah, I felt really encouraged. The part of your sermon where you mentioned it's not our words that bring people to Christ, right? It's the Spirit moving. When I was listening to that, I just had this sweet memory of, even that being how I was saved, right? That it's not just that's encouraging for sharing faith and that I should go out and share my faith too, but it just had this sweet undertones or feeling of, wow, God did grab me before I did anything, and it wasn't some logic that clicked in my mind. He just grabbed me. And yeah, it felt real loving and encouraging and not based on performance.
That's good. Yeah, I think the thing that stood out to me as I studied last week, and even just thinking through how to communicate some of these things, the thing that kept coming back to me was, this is the introduction into, for Paul in a long letter. He introduces the work of the Spirit. And it's encouraging to me to know that God had a plan to offer salvation and accomplish salvation through Jesus. And Jesus, as a part of God's plan, knew that he would leave the Spirit with us. And the Spirit isn't some scary thing that we should avoid, but the Spirit's actually working among us and drawing us to see more of Jesus. And the Spirit of God is what's revealing truths about the gospel and reminding us of that, and also has sealed us and sustains us. And so I don't know, that there's this opening of a door in chapter 2 of the work of the Spirit. We're going to see a lot of it in the coming weeks, but that God would leave the Spirit, that we have the Spirit, that we're not left alone, is an encouragement to me. All right, there we are. We weaved all around that and dodged hard questions and all of that. Who has? Oh, you don't have it. What are we doing next week? Some stuff from 1 Corinthians. Do you have it, Austin? Oh, God bless you, Kirsten. God's blessings on you and through you. All right. Chapter 3, verses 1 through 17 next week. See you then. Adios.